It's necessary to be slightly underemployed if you are to do something significant. Take young researchers, put them together in virtual seclusion, give them an unprecedented degree of freedom and turn up the pressure by fostering competitiveness. Science moves with the spirit of an adventure characterized both by youthful arrogance and by the belief that the truth, once found, would be simple as well as pretty. The pace of discovery is going unbelievably fast. DNA was my only gold rush. I regarded DNA as worth a gold rush. The ever-quickening advances of science made possible by the success of the Human Genome Project will also soon let us see the essences of mental disease. Only after we understand them at the genetic level can we rationally seek out appropriate therapies for such illnesses as schizophrenia and bipolar disease. I have an odd theory on happiness, and it bothers people. My general theory is that happiness is a reward for an animal doing what it should be doing. So if a horse runs, it feels happy. Or if you are too thin, you can't be happy, because evolution wants you to be tense and anxious, trying to wake up in the morning looking for food. The time has come to seriously ask whether antioxidant use much more likely causes than prevents cancer. I've had strong opinions probably since I was born. It makes you unpopular, but what can you do? I don't want 100 different cures of cancer. I want, give me 5. So if you had, 5 medicines, you could do away with 90% of cancer. That's sort of my objective. I think we're going to do it. Some think there is something wrong about enhancing people. Ultimately, we'll help the people we discriminate against if we try to understand more about them. Genetics will lead to a world where there is a sympathy for the underdog. I have never seen Francis Crick in a modest mood. Perhaps in other company he is that way, but I have never had reason so to judge him. I would only once have the opportunity to let my scientific career encompass a path from the double helix to the 3 billion steps of the human genome. Spotting a rare bird is never worth the bite of a cur. Once bitten by a German shepherd, I knew that I preferred cats, even if they are bird killers. Life is long enough for more than one chance at a rare bird. You've never heard of an English lover. Only an English patient. A clone of Einstein wouldn't be stupid, but he wouldn't necessarily be any genius, either. I want to see cancer cured in my lifetime. It might be. You move forward through knowledge. You prevail through knowledge. I love the word prevail. Prevail. We should govern our actions by assuming that people are more good than bad. Whereas, most of our social policies dictate that people are more bad than good. That if you do something, it'll be seized by the rich to exploit the poor. 1/3 of all female infertility is the result of blocked fallopian tubes. If fertilization could be done in the lab and then the fertilized egg implanted in the womb, it would get around that problem. Millions of women who cannot have children would suddenly be able to. Biology has at least 50 more interesting years. I do think one success of Northern Europe, which the United States came from, was its willingness to accept innovation in business practices like Adam Smith and the whole Enlightenment. It essentially made the merchant class free instead of controlled by the king and aristocracy. That was essential. I don't want to die until I see cancer cured. One could not be a successful scientist without realizing that, in contrast to the popular conception supported by newspapers and mothers of scientists, a goodly number of scientists are not only narrow-minded and dull, but also just stupid. I never could read science fiction. I was just uninterested in it. And you know, I don't like to read novels where the hero just goes beyond what I think could exist. And it doesn't interest me because I'm not learning anything about something I'll actually have to deal with. By the age of 11, I was no longer going to Sunday Mass, and going on bird-watching walks with my father. So early on, I heard of Charles Darwin. I guess, you know, he was the big hero. And, you know, you understand life as it now exists through evolution. As a child, I lived with being punier than other boys in class. The only consolation was my parents' empathy. They encouraged constant trips to the local drugstore for chocolate milkshakes to fatten me up. The shakes made me happy, but still, all through grammar school, other kids shoved me around. My parents made it clear that I should never display even the slightest disrespect to individuals who had the power to let me skip a half grade or move into more challenging classes. While it was all right for me to know more about a topic than my 6th grade teacher had ever learned, questioning her facts could only lead to trouble. I have a son, who is not an ordinary form of schizophrenia, but clearly, cannot take care of himself. And the great fear of all parents is, when the parents die, who takes care of your child? And the answer is, they become homeless. If we could honestly promise young couples that we knew how to give them offspring with superior character, why should we assume they would decline? Common sense tells us that if scientists find ways to greatly improve human capabilities, there will no stopping the public from happily seizing them. As an educator, I have always striven to see that the fruits of the American dream are available to all. I had become monomaniacal about DNA only in 1951 when I had just turned 23 and as a postdoctoral fellow was temporarily in Naples attending a small May meeting on biologically important macromolecules. I was always very curious about what a scientist's life was like when I was young. Of course, when I was young, you didn't have very many opportunities to find out with no web, TV. I was very lucky. I was born in the city of Chicago and went to the University of Chicago where I actually saw things. I wanted to see if I could write a good book. Today, the theory of evolution is an accepted fact for everyone but a fundamentalist minority, whose objections are based not on reasoning but on doctrinaire adherence to religious principles. I think the reason people are dealing with science less well now than 50 years ago is that it has become so complicated. I have been much blessed. If you succeed with your first dream, it helps. You know, people trust you, possibly, for the second one. They give you a chance to play out your second one. My heroes were never scientists. They were Graham Greene and Christopher Isherwood, you know, good writers. The luckiest thing that ever happened to me was that my father didn't believe in God, and so he had no hang-ups about souls. To all those who have drawn the inference from my words that Africa, as a continent, is somehow genetically inferior, I can only apologize unreservedly. I never dreamed that in my lifetime my own genome would be sequenced. We're not all equal, it's simply not true. That isn't science. Our goal should be to understand our differences. Science has always been my preoccupation, and when you think a breakthrough is possible, it is terribly exciting. There are many people of color who are very talented. I am thrilled to see my genome. It's so difficult writing about living people. Genes, girls, and GAMO was an attempt, even more than the double helix, to mix science with one's personal life. With the double helix, no one had done it before, but I thought I'd try. I never wanted to be liked by the majority of people, but there were always some people that I desperately wanted to be liked by. And so you've got to behave in a way that. The way I put it is that if you want to be a real intellectual, you've got to have someone to save you. My wife and I have a schizophrenic son. We didn't want to accept this for 30 years, so we put him under great pressure when we shouldn't have. He just wanted to be looked after, and we didn't respect that. We tried to make him independent. If someone's liver doesn't work, we blame it on the genes. If someone's brain doesn't work properly, we blame the school. It's actually more humane to think of the condition as genetic. For instance, you don't want to say that someone is born unpleasant, but sometimes that might be true. If you accept that people are the products of evolution, then you have to have an open mind to the truth. Unfair discrimination exists whether we like it or not. I wouldn't have married a gum-chewing vegetarian. If you go into science, I think you better go in with a dream that maybe you, too, will get a Nobel Prize. It's not that I went in and I thought I was very bright and I was going to get one, but I'll confess, I knew what it was. Great wealth could make an enormous difference over the next decade if they sensibly support the scientific elite. Just the elite. Because the elite makes most of the progress. You should worry about people who produce really novel inventions, not pedantic hacks. I started doing science when I was effectively 20, a graduate student of Salvador Luria at Indiana University. And that was, it took me about 2 years, being a graduate student with Luria, deciding I wanted to find the structure of DNA, that is, DNA was going to be my objective. My whole life has been basically trying to find intelligent students or, highly motivated students and giving them an opportunity to do good science. I wish there would be more movies about scientists.